Good afternoon. My name is Christy Ballard, and I'm the General Counsel for the Tennessee Department of Education. Welcome to our training today on the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics. You will all get a copy of the slide deck so that you can refer to it later. It also has my contact information, which is christy.ballard@tn.gov. Most everything I say today will be well represented on one of the slides as part of the slide deck. You can refer back to it anytime. First of all, let's talk about what is the purpose of a code of ethics? Is it different from a code of conduct? Or are they the same? Most every profession and even companies have what they call a code of conduct and sometimes a code of ethics. What I think about a code of ethics is it is usually more broad. A code of ethics is typically a set of guiding principles for the profession or a general idea of what types of behavior and decisions are acceptable. Whereas in contrast, a code of conduct is typically more focused. It defines how individuals should act in very specific situations. Sometimes you see that codes of conduct and codes of ethics are kind of merged. So I think for the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics, it serves several purposes. It clarifies the mission of teachers and education, the values and principles of the profession. It provides guidance and sets common ethical standards to promote consistency in behavior across the profession. It also creates a culture of trust, integrity, and excellence. It builds the reputation of the profession. It may attract candidates to the profession, and it could also even drive social change. So when you look at the Code of Ethics for teachers, I don't think it's something that teachers should be fearful of. I think it's something that you should be proud of and understand that it will continue to improve the profession. Now, let's talk about a little true or false quiz, some concepts that we're going to discuss in more detail later. Here's your first question, true or false? Teachers may never accept gifts from students. What do you think? Somebody has said in the chat that teachers should not accept gifts from students. So maybe that's a true statement. Oh, someone has said, it depends. That's a very good answer. That's a lawyer's answer. I think this question is false. I think the person who said it depends on the gift is very much correct. And remember, when you're answering a question written by a lawyer, anytime you see the word never, that's a good indication that maybe it's false. And we're going to talk more in depth about the circumstances under which maybe a teacher may accept a gift from a student, when it's appropriate and when it's not. Okay, teachers are prohibited from tutoring students for pay after school hours. This is an issue, and by the way, the Teacher Code of Ethics was revised in 2018. So some of the provisions were changed, and there was one related to this question that was revised, and it caused a little bit of heartburn for teachers across the state because they thought that it would definitely prohibit them from ever tutoring students. And a lot of teachers enjoy over the summer on Saturdays and sometimes in the evenings during the school year, tutoring teachers. I want to put fears to rest. The new Teacher Code of Ethics revised in 2018 did not totally prohibit the tutoring of students for pay. But you do have to be very cautious about when and how you do that. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Teachers are only responsible for the behavior of students assigned to their classes. True or false? If you're not my student, you're not my problem. Not a very good attitude to have. And of course, that question is false, or statement is false. True or false? A teacher may pass out flyers and recommend his spouse's salon to students and parents as long as he does it during lunch or other non-instructional time. Can you use your school day to solicit for a family business? getting lots of answers. I think that's a little easier, and that's false. Next question. The teacher code of ethics only applies to a teacher's actions while they are working and may never impact their private life. There's that word never. I think I gave it away. That is false. We know that teachers especially are held to a higher standard. I like to joke and say sometimes teachers are almost treated like members of the clergy. I mean, you are put on a pedestal. And while you do have the right to have a private life and you have certain constitutional rights that apply to your behavior off campus and outside of work time, we all know there are certain behaviors that if you engage in them, they could impact your employment, most definitely, and could be deemed a violation of the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics, excuse me. Okay, let's get the broad overview. Just so you know for your reference, and you can find it later, the Teacher Code of Ethics is found in Title 49, Chapter 5, Part 10. Now, when you look at, I'm not going to read these to you because I'm going to go into depth about what each provision or section of the code on the screen covers. So this is just kind of your roadmap of what we're going to talk about as we continue. I will say that when the law was revised and changed in 2018, the biggest revision of the law was an addition that you could actually lose your teaching license for violation of the Code of Ethics. For years before, there's been a Teacher Code of Ethics for years, even before it was in state law specifically. It was on the TEA website, but there always, or for many years, I think for the 20 years I've been doing this, it has always been listed as a reason for which you could lose your employment. You could be terminated for cause for violating the Teacher Code of Ethics. But in 2018, the Tennessee General Assembly revised that law. And now licensure action can be taken by the State Board of Education against a teacher if they violate the Teacher Code of Ethics, including, and this is very important, failure to report another teacher for violating the Code of Ethics. That's a significant revision to the law, and that's a provision that people thought, well, a lot of teachers were nervous about. I mean, that's pretty daunting to think if you witness a colleague violating the Teacher Code of Ethics that you would have to turn them in and report them, or you could face sanctions yourself. But many professions, for example, lawyers have the same obligation. Our Code of Ethics, it requires us to report ethical violations by our colleagues and fellow attorneys. So it's not unique to the Teacher Code of Ethics, but it is a significant change to what was in state law before. Okay. Of course, this provision of the law starts out with just some general legislative findings. I'm not going to read you what's on the slide. You can look back to that later, but it's just talking about how the profession, an educator believing in the worth and dignity of each human being recognizes the supreme importance of the pursuit of truth, devotion to excellence, and the nurture of democratic principles. It's very, as we say in the country, it's highfalutin language, but it's just the intro to the Code of Ethics. The next provision is 1007 is the professional development training requirements. And basically every teacher has to receive this training annually. So as soon as this training is completed, you can check it off your list and you have satisfied that legal requirement. I spoke earlier about the requirement to report a breach of the Teacher Code of Ethics. The law specifically states that an educator who has personal knowledge of a breach by another educator of the Teacher Code of Ethics shall report the breach to the educator's immediate supervisor, director of schools, or the local board of education within 30 days of discovering the breach. So you have 30 days. So I think for purposes of the state special schools, you can go to your immediate supervisor, the director of schools. Of course, state special schools don't have a local board of education, so you probably would go through the superintendent or the director of schools. And the second provision of that law is failure to report a breach of the teacher code of ethics or to file a report of any criminal activity or other misconduct that is required by federal or state law is a breach of the teacher code of ethics. So that's very specific about your duties. Okay, let's talk about one of the most important sections of the teacher code of ethics, the language with regard to an educator's obligation to students. And there's some intro language. An educator shall strive to help each student realize the student's potential as a worthy and effective member of society. An educator therefore works to stimulate the spirit of inquiry, the acquisition of knowledge and understanding, and the thoughtful formulation of worthy goals. Now, in fulfillment of this obligation to the student, an educator shall, and that's what the law says, and then there is a long list. I'm going to go through most of these. Some I'm going to touch on a little bit more than others. Some are fairly obvious, and I will say it's a bit frustrating to me because a few of them are redundant. But as I've learned from all good teachers, the important points bear repeating. So the first one is to abide by all applicable federal and state laws. That's pretty specific. So if you violate a federal or state law, you could be in violation of the teacher code of ethics. Not unreasonably restrain the student from independent action in the pursuit of learning. As you can see, this would not be considered a code of conduct, this portion. It's setting a guiding principle. It's not talking about a specific action. Okay, here's another one. Provide the student with professional education services in a non-discriminatory manner and in consonance with accepted best practices known to the educator. I think you could argue that above, if you discriminate, that there are types of discrimination that are violations of both federal and state laws. A few more. Respect the constitutional rights of the student. Here again, there's some redundancy there. You can go back to you have to comply with federal and state laws, act in a non-discriminatory manner. Not unreasonably deny the student access to varying points of view. Now that's interesting. Think about when that could possibly be an issue. Does anyone have an idea about how this could come up in the classroom or be relevant? Somebody said government classes. And because we've just been through a long political season, you could be teaching a government class about elections. And, if you stress maybe your personal viewpoints to the exclusion of others, and we could probably talk more about expressing your personal viewpoints about an election, because we also have, most of you know about Tennessee's Little Hatch Act, that political activity during the school day when you are on duty is actually prohibited by state law. So we can talk more about that, but that might be an example of a violation of this provision. Not deliberately suppressing or distorting subject matter relevant to the student's progress. Also says to make a reasonable effort to protect the student from conditions harmful to learning or to health and safety. What comes to mind when you hear about making a reasonable effort to protect students from harm? That's right. Someone put in the chat bullying. I know you all go through that bullying training, and there is a specific statute in Tennessee code that requires every school district in Tennessee to have a bullying policy and to investigate complaints of bullying. So that's one very good example. What if you don't know the lockdown procedures or the safety protocols? That's, you can think about it that way. Also, make reasonable effort to protect the emotional well-being of the student. That makes me think of bullying as well, because we all know that that bullying or students being mistreated, it's not always physical. And there are people who would argue that maybe the emotional and type impact of bullying is much worse than physical in some cases. A provision says that you should not intentionally expose the student to embarrassment or disparagement. I will tell you, this is one that's discussed a lot. What comes to mind when you think about exposing a student to disparagement or embarrassment? Punishment. Somebody said punishment in the chat. That's a really good example. When you think back to years ago, maybe some methods of punishment or discipline that teachers used, I hope a lot of years ago, I remember people talking about drawing a circle on the blackboard and making a student put their nose on the blackboard in the circle. Is that something we do now? I hope not. I remember seeing old cartoons of a student sitting in the corner with the little pointed, I think the dunce cap on. We don't do that anymore. What we do now is remember that student discipline is about disciplining student. And where does the word discipline come from? Disciple, to teach. What we're trying to do is to teach students what behavior is appropriate, not to embarrass them or disparage them publicly. So I think any form of discipline that has more to do with humiliating or embarrassing a student could be brought up to be a violation of the code of ethics. Someone else said, what about athletics? And we all know, and some of us, experienced when we were young, teachers or coaches who were tough on us to make us better. And I've had people say, coaches who, call students names or, yell at them during practice. I don't think every coach who's firm and hard and has, methods like that would be considered to be violating the code of ethics, but it's something to be thinking about. If you are intentionally calling out a student and disparaging them, calling students names repeatedly, things like that, even if it's not on the basketball court or the football field, if it's in the classroom, occasionally you'll run across situations where teachers have blatantly used students as the butt of jokes to make the rest of the class laugh. I know things can always be taken to an extreme, but I think I would always be cautious about, publicly embarrassing a student. Okay. Additionally, not on the basis of race, color, creed, disability, sex, national origin, marital status, political or religious beliefs, family, social, or cultural background, or sexual orientation unfairly, that's a long list, exclude the student from participation in any program, deny benefits to the student, or grant any advantage to the student. This is a bit redundant, although I think it's good because it's very specific, because doing any of these things generally is going to be a violation of state or federal law, a violation of the student's civil rights. So, this is, building up on those earlier provisions. Now, the last two on this slide that I want to talk about, I think I want to stress a bit, not use the educator's professional relationship with the student for private advantage. Remember the question about the salon and the tutoring, those kinds of things. I think that's where questions like that arise. Not use the educator's professional relationship with the student for private advantage. So what I think is if you have a side business or you have a family business, it is never appropriate to solicit for that business to your students as a part of the school day, things like that. I think I would be very cautious about that. In fact, the state and the Department of Education, we have a non-solicitation policy. So you really shouldn't be bringing in, outside things to sell to staff or students. So I would be very cautious about that. Okay, not disclose information about the student obtained in the course of the educator's professional service unless disclosure of the information is permitted, serves a compelling professional purpose, or is required by law. I really like this one because it shows a distinction between this provision and FERPA generally. Remember, you all know FERPA, you've had training on it, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. That is the federal law that gives parents some control over their child's education records. It is also the federal law that says that educators cannot disclose personally identifiable information about a student to outside parties without first getting prior written consent from the parents. Now, there are a list of exceptions to that, but remember, FERPA is about disclosing information from records. This is broader than that. This provision talks about information obtained in the course of the educator's professional service. This could be something that happened in your classroom, you witnessed in the hallway. So it's broader than just something from a record. So if something happened in your class or at school and you observed it or you knew about it because of your position and you shared it at your Friday night barbecue or maybe even a big faculty lounge discussion, even if it's not from a student record and not a violation of FERPA, it could be a violation of the Teacher Code of Ethics. So also keep in mind oversharing on social media. Teachers who overshare on social media and identify students on social media could be seen as violating the Teacher Code of Ethics. And if it's about records, it could even be a violation of federal law. It could impact your employment along with your license. So be very cautious. And I think I've talked to you before about social media, about how to be very cautious about tweeting and putting Facebook updates about your work. It's something you should be very careful about. You should not knowingly make false or malicious statements about students or colleagues. You should ensure your interactions with students take place in transparent and appropriate settings. You know, this goes back to just being reasonable and thinking about the situation. Always remember the boundaries of you are the teacher and they are the student. And when it talks about students, interactions with students should take place in transparent and appropriate settings. We all know that there are times when you will have to be one-on-one with students. Just make sure that you're doing it in a well-trafficked area of the school. Maybe have your door open so that anybody walking up and down the halls can see in. You know, think about that. You know, don't do it under the gym behind the boiler room. That's an extreme example, but just think about, and this protects the student, it protects you and the perception of what could be going on. Last on this slide, not engage in any sexually related behavior with the student, whether verbal, written, physical, or electronic, with or without the student's consent. Sexually related behavior includes, but is not limited to, behaviors such as making sexual jokes or sexual remarks, engaging in sexual kidding, sexual teasing, or sexual innuendo, pressuring the student for dates or sexual favors, engaging in inappropriate physical touching, groping, or grabbing, kissing, rape, threatening physical harm, and committing sexual assault. Now, I read that to you. This is where, when I stated that some of the Teacher Code of Ethics may sound a bit more like a code of conduct because it's talking about very specific behaviors. This is probably the most specific thing in the Code of Ethics. The General Assembly, when they revised the law in 2018, they talked about this provision a lot. They thought it was very important, and they wanted to make sure that no one misunderstood what they were talking about, because, you know, they feared that some people might not exactly understand the definition of sexually related behavior. Some of it is very obvious, and it's almost shocking that you would have to spell it out in the law. But I would point your attention to making sexual jokes or sexual remarks, engaging in sexual kidding, sexual teasing, or sexual innuendo. That is not as obvious to some. I have seen situations where that happened in front of students. Maybe it's educators and the adults joking around with each other and not thinking about the fact that students are present and seeing and hearing the conversation. Also, if you observe students engaging in this type of behavior and you fail to take any action, what does that do? What happens when the favorite teacher in a school or a coach observes this kind of behavior among students and does nothing about it, or maybe even laughs at a joke? That is what message is that sending? Exactly. That is sending the message that that's acceptable behavior or it's condoned. So that is one thing I always like to call attention. There are teachable moments every day, probably as you work through the classroom, through the halls, maybe at athletic events or other extracurricular activities. You have many opportunities to teach students about what is acceptable behavior and what is not. So please take advantage of those and either report behavior or use it as an individual teachable moment to students and then report it. Okay, some of these are so obvious, it's like the one before. Not furnish alcohol or illegal or unauthorized drugs to the student. Strive to prevent the use of alcohol or illegal or unauthorized drugs by the student when the student is under the educator's supervision on school or LEA premises, during school activities, or any private setting. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. I think it's obvious. Here's another one I find very obvious. Refrain from the use of alcohol while on school or LEA premises or during school activities which students are present. This one I want to call attention to is maintain a professional approach with students at all times. I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about maintaining appropriate boundaries. Always remember, you're not there to be a student's friend. You're there to be their teacher. And you can make a great difference in every student's life by being their teacher and having the most appropriate boundaries. It protects you from false accusations, and it protects the student. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a bit to a new section of the law that is entitled Educators' Obligations to the Education Profession. So this is a little more general. And some of the provisions where educators have to, in the fulfillment of their obligation to the profession, they shall not deliberately make a false statement or fail to disclose a material fact related to their competency, their qualifications, or anything else like that on an application for a professional position. It is also very specifically set forth in the law that if you falsify information on a job application, it's grounds for termination, if it's discovered later. Unfortunately, we do see this from time to time. We see it on licensure applications. We've had that, not in a while, but occasionally it comes up. Misrepresenting the educator's professional qualifications or assisting the entry into the profession of a person known to be unqualified in respect to character, education, or other relevant attributes. So be careful about those close friends who want to use you as a reference, but maybe there's something about them that makes them not a good fit to be a teacher. Knowingly make a false statement concerning the qualifications of a candidate for a professional position. So all of these are kind of related. Okay, I'm going to, here's what I like. Knowingly make false or malicious statements about a colleague. That's a really good part of the teacher code of ethics. It's not just about how you interact with students. It's also how you treat your colleagues and how you behave professionally when you're interacting day to day in the workplace, even when students are not present. Disclose information about colleagues obtained in the course of the professional service unless the disclosure serves a compelling professional purpose or is required by law. Some of these are a little more broad, but I think we can all think of situations where this could be a violation. I want to highlight one: accept any gratuity, gift, or favor that might impair or appear to influence professional decisions or actions. Remember the question about gifts. When can you accept a gift from a student or student's parent? I think the circumstances, we discussed earlier, matter. So I think what this provision means is the holidays are coming up. If little Sally brings you that tiny little bottle of Sweet Honesty, I think that's what the Avon perfume used to be called, for Christmas or whatever, are you able to accept that, or do you have to say, oh, Sally, I'm sorry, I can't accept this because it might impair or appear to influence my professional decisions or actions? A token of appreciation, those should not generally be seen as might impair or appear to influence a professional decision or action. However, there could be gifts that could. I think anytime someone tries to hand you cash or gift certificates of a significant amount, maybe a Starbucks gift card for $10 may not fall under that. But if you've got a parent who's trying to give you Titans season tickets, or a gift certificate to a very expensive spa or something like that, that starts to cross the line. So if you ever get a gift where you feel unsure or uncomfortable, talk to your direct supervisor, the director of schools, and of course, I'm always here for the state special schools because I am your lawyer to answer those kinds of questions. But I don't think that this means any gift is a problem. It has to rise to the level of having the appearance of influencing or that it might impair. So I've had people before say, nothing a parent or student could give me would ever make me make a different decision about their grade or anything about their education. It's not just about what you personally feel, it's about appearance as well. So be cautious and always ask if you have questions. Okay, here's some very specific things. This goes along the lines of more of a code of conduct. In the fulfillment of your obligations to the profession, educators shall administer state-mandated assessments fairly and ethically, and conduct themselves in a manner that preserves the dignity and integrity of the education profession. So the first statement, administer state-mandated assessments fairly and ethically, that's kind of specific, but I think you get training on that from the assessment folks, so you know how to do that in the correct way. And there are separate statutes on the books in Tennessee Code that if you breach security with regard to state mandated assessments, that could result in your termination or a licensure action as well. Now, please know that I'm always available for questions. I'm going to repeat my email address again, christy.ballard@tn.gov. Please reach out anytime you have a question, and you should all receive a copy of this slide deck. So sometimes there are questions that don't fit squarely into any of the little boxes. So we're always here to answer them and know that you're not alone. And some of the questions are tough. So have a good afternoon. Thank you.